Question 1. The risk matrix shows a high-severity, high-likelihood threat requiring immediate remediation via a new Cisco FireAMP endpoint policy. However, deploying this policy network-wide could significantly disrupt critical business operations. What is the most prudent process optimization approach to address this situation? Option A. Postpone the deployment of the FireAMP policy until a less disruptive time, prioritizing operational stability over immediate threat mitigation. Option B. Focus solely on the technical efficacy of the FireAMP policy and deploy it without further consideration for its operational impact. Option C. Implement the FireAMP policy across the entire network immediately to ensure maximum protection against the high-priority threat. Option D. Deploy the FireAMP policy to a pilot group of non-critical endpoints first, monitor for operational impact, and then proceed with a phased rollout to the rest of the network. Correct answer is D. Deploy the FireAMP policy to a pilot group of non-critical endpoints first, monitor for operational impact, and then proceed with a phased rollout to the rest of the network. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security operations, balancing the need for rapid threat response with the potential for disruption to critical business processes. The risk matrix, a standard tool for prioritizing security efforts, highlights a high-severity, high-likelihood threat. However, the proposed remediation action, while effective against the threat, carries a significant risk of operational impact. The professional challenge lies in making a decision that mitigates the immediate threat without causing unacceptable collateral damage, all while adhering to established security policies and regulatory compliance. The pressure to act quickly against a high-priority threat can lead to hasty decisions that overlook downstream consequences. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased implementation of the remediation, starting with a limited scope and closely monitoring its impact. This aligns with best practices for process optimization in security operations, particularly when dealing with potentially disruptive changes. By deploying the FireAMP policy to a pilot group first, security professionals can validate its effectiveness and identify any unforeseen operational issues in a controlled environment. This iterative approach allows for adjustments before a full-scale deployment, minimizing the risk of widespread service disruption. This methodology is implicitly supported by general IT governance frameworks that emphasize change management, risk assessment, and phased rollouts to ensure business continuity, which are often mandated or strongly recommended by regulatory bodies overseeing critical infrastructure or data protection. The focus is on achieving security objectives through a method that preserves operational integrity. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the FireAMP policy across the entire network immediately, without any prior testing or phased rollout, represents a failure to adequately assess and manage operational risk. This approach disregards the potential for significant business disruption, which could lead to non-compliance with service-level agreements or even regulatory requirements related to business continuity and availability of services. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence in protecting both the organization's security posture and its operational capacity. Delaying the implementation indefinitely due to the potential for disruption, without exploring alternative mitigation strategies or a phased approach, is also professionally unsound. This inaction leaves the network vulnerable to the identified high-severity threat, directly contradicting the organization's responsibility to maintain a secure environment. This could lead to regulatory penalties if a breach occurs due to this negligence, as many regulations mandate timely remediation of known vulnerabilities and threats. Focusing solely on the technical effectiveness of the FireAMP policy without considering its operational impact is an incomplete risk assessment. Security measures must be integrated into the broader operational context. Purely technical focus can lead to solutions that are technically sound but practically unworkable or detrimental to the organization's overall objectives, potentially violating principles of responsible IT management and governance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such scenarios by first thoroughly understanding the threat and the proposed solution, as outlined in the risk matrix. The next step is to conduct a comprehensive impact assessment, considering not only the security benefits, but also the potential operational, financial, and reputational consequences of the proposed remediation. This should involve collaboration with relevant stakeholders, such as IT operations and business unit managers. Based on this assessment, a phased or iterative implementation strategy should be developed, incorporating pilot testing and continuous monitoring. This decision-making process prioritizes risk mitigation through a balanced approach that considers security, operational continuity, and regulatory compliance, ensuring that security enhancements are implemented responsibly and effectively. Question 2. Assessment of the most effective strategy for optimizing the deployment and ongoing management of Cisco FireAMP endpoints within a corporate network, considering both security efficacy and operational impact. Option A. Immediately deploy a highly restrictive block-all policy across all endpoints to ensure maximum initial security coverage and address any operational disruptions as they arise. Option B. Implement a phased policy rollout, beginning with a broad, less restrictive policy to gather baseline telemetry, followed by iterative refinement based on observed network behavior, threat intelligence, and performance metrics. Option C. Make ad hoc policy adjustments based on user complaints and isolated security alerts without a systematic review of telemetry or overall network impact. Option D. Configure FireAMP with default security policies and rely on vendor-provided threat intelligence without further customization or ongoing performance monitoring. The correct answer is B. Implement a phased policy rollout, beginning with a broad, less restrictive policy to gather baseline telemetry, followed by iterative refinement based on observed network behavior, threat intelligence, and performance metrics. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in optimizing the deployment and management of Sourcefire FireAMP endpoints within a network. The challenge lies in balancing the need for robust security with the operational overhead and potential impact on network performance and user productivity. Achieving this balance requires a deep understanding of the technology, the network environment, and the organization's specific security posture and risk tolerance. Careful judgment is needed to select strategies that enhance security without introducing undue complexity or hindering legitimate business operations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased and data-driven implementation of FireAMP policies, starting with a broad, less restrictive policy to establish a baseline and identify potential conflicts or performance issues. This is followed by iterative refinement based on telemetry and threat intelligence. This methodology aligns with best practices for process optimization in cybersecurity by minimizing disruption, allowing for continuous learning and adaptation, and ensuring that security controls are effective and efficient. It promotes a proactive stance by leveraging data to inform decisions, rather than reactive adjustments. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes both security and operational continuity, demonstrating due diligence in protecting organizational assets while respecting user needs. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a highly restrictive block-all policy from the outset is an ethically flawed approach. While seemingly secure, it fails to account for legitimate business processes and can severely disrupt operations, leading to user frustration and potential workarounds that bypass security controls entirely. This demonstrates a lack of professional judgment and due diligence in understanding the operational context. Deploying FireAMP without a clear policy framework and relying solely on default settings is also professionally unacceptable. This approach neglects the critical step of tailoring security to the specific risks and requirements of the organization. It can lead to either insufficient protection or overblocking, neither of which is an optimal outcome. This reflects a failure to apply systematic process optimization principles. Ignoring telemetry and threat intelligence data after deployment and making policy changes based on anecdotal evidence or intuition is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It signifies a lack of commitment to evidence-based security practices, which is crucial for demonstrating compliance and accountability. This approach is reactive and prone to errors, potentially leaving the network vulnerable or hindering legitimate operations without a clear justification. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, iterative approach to process optimization. This involves 1. Understanding the current state and defining desired outcomes. 2. Developing a plan that considers phased implementation and data collection. 3. Executing the plan. Continuously monitoring performance and security events. 4. Analyzing the collected data to identify areas for improvement and refinement. 5. documenting changes and their impact. This cyclical process ensures that security solutions are not only effective, but also efficient and sustainable within the operational environment. Question 3. Comparative studies suggest that optimizing the process for managing endpoint security policies and threat response within a Cisco Sourcefire FireAMP endpoints deployment is crucial for maintaining a robust security posture. Which of the following strategies best embodies a proactive and efficient approach to process optimization in this context, aligning with best practices for continuous improvement in cybersecurity operations? Option A. Implementing a phased rollout of policy changes based on threat intelligence feeds, coupled with automated response actions triggered by specific alert severities, and establishing regular performance reviews against defined security metrics. Option B. Relying solely on the default security configurations provided by Cisco, assuming they are sufficient for all organizational threat landscapes and operational requirements. Option C. Upgrading the Sourcefire FireAMP endpoint software to the latest version, without assessing the impact on current operational workflows or user training needs. Option D. Conducting a comprehensive review of all existing endpoint security policies only after a significant security incident has occurred to identify root causes and implement corrective measures. Correct answer is A. Implementing a phased rollout of policy changes based on threat intelligence feeds, coupled with automated response actions triggered by specific alert severities, and establishing regular performance reviews against defined security metrics. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between optimizing network security processes and maintaining operational efficiency. Organizations often face resource constraints, requiring a strategic approach to implementing and managing security solutions like Sourcefire FireAMP endpoints. The challenge lies in identifying the most effective methods for process optimization that yield tangible security improvements without causing undue disruption or incurring excessive costs. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands and ensure compliance with relevant regulations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it focuses on a data-driven, iterative improvement cycle. By establishing clear metrics, continuously monitoring performance, and making incremental adjustments, organizations can ensure that their security processes remain effective and aligned with evolving threats and business needs. This aligns with the principles of continuous improvement, often mandated or encouraged by regulatory frameworks that require organizations to demonstrate ongoing efforts to maintain and enhance their security posture. For instance, in the U.S., frameworks like NIST Cybersecurity Framework emphasize continuous monitoring and improvement. An incorrect approach that relies solely on reactive measures, such as addressing incidents only after they occur, fails to proactively mitigate risks. This can lead to significant financial and reputational damage, and may violate regulatory requirements that mandate proactive security controls and risk management. Another incorrect approach, implementing changes without proper testing or validation, risks introducing new vulnerabilities or disrupting critical business operations. This could be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence, a common ethical and regulatory expectation. A third incorrect approach, focusing only on technology upgrades without considering the associated process changes, overlooks the human and procedural elements crucial for effective security. This can lead to underutilization of security tools and a false sense of security, potentially violating compliance obligations that require effective implementation and operation of security controls. Professional reasoning in such situations should involve a structured decision-making process. This includes 1. Understanding the current state of security processes and identifying key performance indicators, KPI, relevant to endpoint security. 2. Researching and evaluating various process optimization methodologies, considering their applicability to the specific security environment and available resources. 3. Prioritizing optimization efforts based on potential impact on risk reduction and operational efficiency. 4. Implementing changes in a controlled manner, with thorough testing and validation. 5. Establishing a continuous monitoring and feedback loop to measure the effectiveness of implemented changes and identify further areas for improvement. This systematic approach ensures that security processes are not only optimized, but also remain aligned with organizational objectives and regulatory requirements. Question 4. Strategic planning requires a methodical approach to incident response, particularly when dealing with sophisticated threats detected by Sourcefire FireAMP. Considering the need for both rapid containment and comprehensive analysis, which of the following actions best exemplifies a process-optimized strategy for managing an advanced persistent threat? Option A. Execute a phased containment strategy, beginning with isolating high-risk endpoints identified through FireAMP telemetry and threat intelligence, while simultaneously initiating detailed logging and documentation of all response actions within the FireAMP console. Option B. Initiate a full forensic imaging of all potentially compromised endpoints before any containment actions are taken to preserve all evidence. Option C. Rely solely on FireAMP's automated threat blocking capabilities to neutralize the APT, assuming all malicious activity will be automatically remediated. Option D. Immediately isolate all endpoints exhibiting suspicious activity based on initial FireAMP alerts, without further investigation, to prevent lateral movement. The correct answer is D. Immediately isolate all endpoints exhibiting suspicious activity based on initial FireAMP alerts, without further investigation, to prevent lateral movement. Explanation: Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for rapid threat response with the requirement for thorough, documented processes. The pressure to quickly contain a detected advanced persistent threat apt can lead to shortcuts in the incident response workflow. However, bypassing established procedures, even under duress, can have significant downstream consequences, including incomplete forensic data, potential legal or compliance violations, and an inability to accurately assess the full scope of the compromise. The professional challenge lies in adhering to established protocols while still achieving an effective and timely resolution. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes maintaining a structured incident response process, even during a high-pressure situation. This involves documenting each step taken, including the rationale for decisions, and ensuring that all actions are logged within the Sourcefire FireAMP endpoint solution. This aligns with best practices for cybersecurity incident response, which mandate thorough documentation for post-incident analysis, legal discovery, and continuous improvement of security posture. Adhering to these documented procedures ensures that the response is not only effective in containing the threat, but also defensible and auditable, meeting potential regulatory requirements for incident handling and reporting. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing immediate containment by isolating endpoints without a clear, documented plan or subsequent forensic analysis. This can lead to the loss of critical evidence needed to understand the APT's initial entry vector, lateral movement, and exfiltration methods. From a regulatory perspective, this failure to conduct a comprehensive investigation could violate requirements for incident reporting and remediation that necessitate understanding the root cause and impact. Ethically, it represents a failure to perform due diligence in protecting the organization's assets and data. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on automated threat blocking by FireAMP without human oversight or validation. While automation is crucial for speed, an APT may employ sophisticated evasion techniques that bypass initial automated defenses. Without human analysis to confirm the threat and its context, critical actions might be missed, or false positives could lead to unnecessary disruption. This lack of validation can result in an incomplete understanding of the threat landscape, potentially leaving other systems vulnerable and failing to meet regulatory obligations for effective threat management. A third incorrect approach is to delay formal incident reporting and documentation until after the immediate crisis has passed. This can lead to memory lapses, incomplete information, and a failure to meet mandated reporting timelines. Many regulatory frameworks require timely notification of breaches or significant security incidents. Postponing documentation can also hinder the ability to conduct a thorough post-mortem analysis, learn from the incident, and implement necessary improvements, thereby failing to uphold professional responsibility for continuous security enhancement. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a scenario should employ a structured incident response framework. This involves 1. Initial assessment and triage to understand the severity and nature of the threat. 2. Activation of the incident response plan, ensuring all steps are logged. 3. Containment, eradication, and recovery, with each action meticulously documented within the FireAMP console and supporting logs. 4. Post-incident analysis and reporting, which includes a thorough review of all collected data and lessons learned. This systematic approach ensures that while the threat is addressed effectively, the response is also compliant, auditable, and contributes to long-term security resilience. Question 5. To address the challenge of implementing Sourcefire FireAMP endpoint security while ensuring minimal disruption to the marketing department's real-time advertising data feeds, which approach best balances security requirements with operational continuity? Option A. Conduct a phased rollout of the Sourcefire FireAMP policy, starting with a pilot group of non-critical endpoints, and engage the marketing department in defining and testing specific exceptions or configurations that maintain security posture while allowing essential data flows. Option B. Prioritize the complete technical implementation of Sourcefire FireAMP's most stringent security features first, deferring any discussions or testing related to potential business impact until the security solution is fully operational. Option C. Immediately deploy the full Sourcefire FireAMP security policy across all endpoints, assuming that any necessary adjustments for the marketing department can be made reactively after initial deployment issues are identified. Option D. Implement the Sourcefire FireAMP solution with broad, unconfigured exceptions for all traffic originating from or destined for known marketing-related IP addresses to avoid any potential interference. The correct answer is A. Conduct a phased rollout of the Sourcefire FireAMP policy, starting with a pilot group of non-critical endpoints, and engage the marketing department in defining and testing specific exceptions or configurations that maintain security posture while allowing essential data flows. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity, balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational requirements of a business. The IT security team is tasked with implementing advanced endpoint protection using Sourcefire FireAMP, which inherently involves deep packet inspection and behavioral analysis. However, the marketing department, a critical stakeholder, is concerned that these security measures might inadvertently disrupt their real-time data feeds from external advertising platforms, impacting campaign performance and revenue. The challenge lies in ensuring that security is not implemented in a vacuum, but rather in collaboration with business units to minimize operational impact while achieving security objectives. This requires a nuanced understanding of both the technology's capabilities and the business's critical functions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased implementation strategy that includes thorough testing and validation in a controlled environment before full deployment. This methodology aligns with best practices in IT security and project management, emphasizing risk mitigation and stakeholder buy-in. Specifically, it addresses the regulatory and ethical imperative to implement security controls responsibly, ensuring they do not cause undue harm to business operations. By engaging with the marketing department early, understanding their dependencies, and conducting pilot tests, the security team can identify and remediate potential conflicts. This collaborative approach fosters trust and ensures that the security solution is effective without compromising essential business processes, thereby adhering to principles of due diligence and responsible technology deployment. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the full security policy immediately without prior testing or consultation with the marketing department is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and stakeholder engagement. It risks disrupting critical business operations, potentially leading to financial losses and reputational damage, which could have legal ramifications if contractual obligations are breached. Furthermore, it violates the ethical principle of minimizing harm to the organization. Deploying the security solution with broad, unconfigured exceptions for all marketing-related traffic is also professionally unacceptable. While seemingly addressing the immediate concern, this creates significant security gaps. It undermines the purpose of implementing advanced endpoint protection and exposes the organization to increased risk. This approach fails to meet the organization's duty of care to protect its assets and data, potentially violating compliance requirements that mandate effective security controls. Focusing solely on technical implementation and deferring any discussion of potential business impact until after deployment is another flawed strategy. This reactive approach ignores the proactive nature of effective security management. It creates an adversarial relationship with business units and increases the likelihood of significant operational disruptions, which can lead to regulatory scrutiny and potential penalties for non-compliance with security standards or service-level agreements. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, collaborative approach. This involves 1. Understanding the business context. Identify critical business functions and their dependencies on network resources. 2. Stakeholder engagement. Proactively communicate with all affected departments to understand their concerns and requirements. 3. Phased implementation and testing. Deploy new security controls in a controlled manner, starting with pilot groups or test environments to validate functionality and assess impact. 4. Continuous monitoring and adjustment. Regularly review security logs and operational performance to identify and address any unforeseen issues. This iterative process ensures that security solutions are effective, compliant, and aligned with business objectives. Question 6. The audit findings indicate that the current incident response plan for handling alerts generated by Sourcefire FireAMP endpoints lacks specific procedures for escalation and containment, potentially delaying critical actions during a security event. Which of the following actions best addresses this finding from a professional and regulatory compliance perspective? Option A. Acknowledge the finding but defer any updates to the incident response plan until the next scheduled review cycle, assuming current procedures are adequate for minor events. Option B. Immediately disable the Sourcefire FireAMP endpoint protection on all affected systems to prevent further alerts while a manual investigation is conducted. Option C. Initiate a formal review and update of the incident response plan to include detailed escalation matrices, containment strategies, and post-incident analysis procedures, ensuring alignment with relevant cybersecurity frameworks and organizational policies. Option D. Implement a temporary workaround by creating ad hoc communication channels for alert notifications without formally updating the documented incident response plan. Correct answer is C. Initiate a formal review and update of the incident response plan to include detailed escalation matrices, containment strategies, and post-incident analysis procedures, ensuring alignment with relevant cybersecurity frameworks and organizational policies. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential gap in the organization's incident response capabilities concerning endpoint security, specifically how alerts generated by Sourcefire FireAMP endpoints are handled. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate threat mitigation with adherence to established security policies and regulatory requirements. The pressure to respond quickly to potential security incidents can sometimes lead to shortcuts that bypass necessary procedures, potentially increasing risk or violating compliance mandates. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the audit finding by initiating a formal review and update of the incident response plan. This ensures that the organization's procedures for handling endpoint security alerts are documented, tested, and aligned with current threats and regulatory expectations. Specifically, in the context of U.S. regulations, assuming this is the jurisdiction for the 500-275 exam, as it's common for Cisco certifications. This aligns with the principles of NIST frameworks, e.g., NIST SB 800-61 Rev. 2, Computer Security Incident Handling Guide, which emphasize the importance of a well-defined and regularly updated incident response plan. This approach demonstrates due diligence, proactive risk management, and a commitment to maintaining an effective security posture, which are critical for regulatory compliance and operational resilience. An incorrect approach that involves immediately disabling the FireAMP endpoint protection without proper analysis or authorization would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action bypasses established incident response procedures, potentially leaving the network vulnerable to further or more sophisticated attacks. It also fails to document the incident or the remediation steps, hindering post-incident analysis and future prevention efforts. From a compliance perspective, this could be seen as a failure to adequately protect sensitive data or systems, potentially violating regulations like HIPAA or PCI DSS if applicable. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the audit finding and assuming the current procedures are sufficient, represents a failure in professional responsibility and a disregard for established governance. This passive stance increases the likelihood of future security breaches and noncompliance. It demonstrates a lack of commitment to continuous improvement and risk mitigation, which are fundamental to cybersecurity, best practices, and regulatory expectations. This could lead to significant penalties and reputational damage if an incident occurs due to outdated or inadequate procedures. A third incorrect approach, which is to only address the specific alert without updating the overall incident response plan, is also professionally unsound. While addressing the immediate alert is important, failing to update the plan means the underlying procedural weakness remains. This reactive, rather than proactive, approach is insufficient for long-term security and compliance. It suggests a lack of understanding of the systemic nature of security management and the importance of robust, documented processes. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, thoroughly understand the audit finding and its potential impact. Second, consult relevant internal policies, procedures, and external regulatory requirements. Third, engage relevant stakeholders, including security operations, IT management, and compliance officers. Fourth, develop and implement a corrective action plan that addresses the root cause of the finding, ensuring it is documented, tested, and integrated into ongoing operations. Finally, conduct regular reviews and updates to maintain the effectiveness of security controls and response capabilities. Question 7. Risk assessment procedures indicate a critical vulnerability in endpoint security that could lead to significant data exfiltration. The recommended mitigation involves deploying Cisco Sourcefire FireAMP endpoints across the organization. Which of the following stakeholder engagement strategies is most likely to secure the necessary resources and buy-in for this deployment, while adhering to professional cybersecurity governance principles? Option A. Scheduling a meeting with department heads to explain the technical nature of the vulnerability and the mandatory requirement for FireAMP deployment to ensure compliance. Option B. Informing the IT operations team of the immediate need to deploy FireAMP and requesting their full cooperation in the implementation process without further stakeholder consultation. Option C. Developing a business case that quantifies the potential financial losses from data exfiltration, outlines the specific risks FireAMP mitigates, and proposes a phased deployment plan with clear ROI. Option D. Presenting a detailed technical analysis of the vulnerability and the FireAMP solution's capabilities to the executive leadership team, emphasizing its advanced threat detection features. The correct answer is D. Presenting a detailed technical analysis of the vulnerability and the FireAMP solution's capabilities to the executive leadership team, emphasizing its advanced threat detection features. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity, balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational requirements of business stakeholders. The challenge lies in translating technical security risks into business impacts that resonate with non-technical stakeholders, and then securing the necessary resources and buy-in for mitigation. The Sourcefire FireAMP endpoint solution, while powerful, requires careful configuration and ongoing management, which can be perceived as an operational burden. The risk assessment has identified a specific vulnerability, but the proposed solution requires investment and potential disruption, creating a conflict between security imperatives and business priorities. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, data-driven engagement with stakeholders, focusing on the business impact of the identified risk and the quantifiable benefits of the proposed solution. This aligns with best practices in risk management and cybersecurity governance, which emphasize clear communication, stakeholder alignment, and a business-centric approach to security. By presenting the risk in terms of potential financial loss, reputational damage, and operational downtime, and by demonstrating how FireAMP mitigates these specific risks, the security team can build a compelling case. This approach fosters trust and collaboration, ensuring that security investments are aligned with organizational objectives and are supported by those who control resources. It also implicitly addresses regulatory expectations for due diligence in risk management and the implementation of appropriate security measures. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely focus on the technical details of the vulnerability and the FireAMP solution without translating them into business terms. This fails to engage stakeholders effectively, as they may not understand the severity of the risk or the value of the proposed mitigation. This can lead to a perception of security as an IT-only problem, rather than a shared responsibility. Ethically, it represents a failure to adequately inform and educate decision-makers about critical risks. Another incorrect approach is to bypass stakeholder consultation and unilaterally implement the solution, assuming it is self-evident. This undermines trust, can lead to operational disruptions that were not anticipated or accounted for, and may result in resistance or resentment from affected departments. It also fails to adhere to organizational governance processes that typically require approval for significant security investments and changes. This approach can also lead to regulatory noncompliance if proper change management and risk acceptance procedures are not followed. A third incorrect approach is to present the risk as an absolute, non-negotiable mandate without exploring alternative mitigation strategies or considering the business context. While the risk assessment is critical, security solutions should be proportionate to the risk and feasible within the organization's operational and financial constraints. This rigid stance can alienate stakeholders and lead to a perception of security as an impediment rather than an enabler. It also fails to demonstrate a nuanced understanding of risk appetite and tolerance, which are key components of effective risk management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a consultative and collaborative approach. This involves 1. Clearly articulating the identified risk and its potential business impact using business-relevant metrics. 2. Presenting the proposed solution, FireAMP, as a means to mitigate these specific impacts, highlighting its benefits and how it addresses the identified gaps. 3. Engaging in dialogue with stakeholders to understand their concerns. Operational constraints and risk tolerance. 4. Exploring alternative mitigation strategies if the initial proposal faces significant resistance, while ensuring that any alternatives still adequately address the risk. 5. Documenting the risk assessment, proposed solution, stakeholder discussions, and the final decision-making process to ensure accountability and compliance. Question 8. Quality control measures reveal that the current configuration of Cisco FireAMP endpoints within the organization's network, operating under U.S. federal regulatory oversight, has been flagged by an internal audit for potential noncompliance with specific endpoint security logging requirements. The audit report cites a deviation from established best practices as outlined in relevant U.S. cybersecurity guidelines. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the security team? Option A. Inform the internal audit team that the finding is likely a misinterpretation of the FireAMP capabilities and request the audit be closed without further action. Option B. Proceed with a broad reconfiguration of all FireAMP policies across the network to ensure compliance, without first pinpointing the exact nature of the audit's concern. Option C. Conduct a detailed technical investigation to ascertain the exact nature of the logging deviation. Cross-reference it with specific requirements in applicable U.S. regulations, such as NIST SB 800-53 controls related to logging and monitoring, and develop a targeted remediation plan if noncompliance is confirmed. Option D. Immediately disable the logging features in FireAMP that are in question to prevent further audit flags while a review is conducted. The correct answer is C. Conduct a detailed technical investigation to ascertain the exact nature of the logging deviation. Cross-reference it with specific requirements in applicable U.S. regulations, such as NIST SB 800-53 controls related to logging and monitoring, and develop a targeted remediation plan if noncompliance is confirmed. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity where a critical security tool, Sourcefire FireAMP endpoints, is flagged for potential noncompliance by an internal audit. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for operational security with the requirement to adhere to established regulatory frameworks and internal policies. Misinterpreting or misapplying these requirements can lead to significant security vulnerabilities, operational disruptions, and regulatory penalties. The pressure to quickly resolve the issue without a thorough understanding of the implications adds to the complexity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic investigation that prioritizes understanding the specific findings of the audit in relation to the applicable regulatory framework. For the U.S. jurisdiction, this would involve referencing regulations like NIST SB 800-53, which outlines security controls for federal information systems and potentially industry-specific regulations like HIPAA for healthcare or PCI DSS for payment card data, if applicable to the organization's sector. The analysis must determine if the FireAMP configuration or deployment indeed violates any mandates regarding endpoint security, logging, or data protection. If a violation is confirmed, the next step is to develop and implement a remediation plan that brings the system into compliance while minimizing disruption. This approach represents best professional practice because it is data-driven, risk-aware, and adheres to the principle of due diligence required by regulatory bodies. It ensures that security decisions are informed by compliance requirements, not just technical expediency. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately disable or significantly alter the FireAMP configuration based solely on the audit finding without a thorough investigation. This is a regulatory failure because it bypasses the due diligence required to understand the nature and severity of the noncompliance. It could lead to a reduction in security posture, leaving the network vulnerable, which is contrary to the intent of most cybersecurity regulations. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of responsibility in managing security tools. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the audit finding as a false positive without providing documented evidence or a formal risk assessment. This is a regulatory failure as it ignores a documented concern raised by an internal control process. Regulations often require organizations to have robust internal audit functions and to act upon their findings. Failing to do so can be interpreted as negligence. Ethically, it shows a disregard for internal oversight mechanisms. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to hide the noncompliance by altering audit logs or documentation. This is a severe regulatory and ethical failure. Tampering with records is illegal and directly violates regulations that mandate accurate record-keeping and transparency. It undermines the integrity of all security and compliance efforts and can lead to severe legal repercussions, including fines and criminal charges. Professional reasoning. When faced with an audit finding concerning a critical security tool like FireAMP, professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, thoroughly understand the audit's specific findings and the exact nature of the alleged noncompliance. Second, consult the relevant regulatory framework, e.g., NIST SB 800-53 for U.S. federal systems, or other applicable U.S. regulations based on industry, to determine the precise requirements. Third, conduct a technical investigation to verify the audit's claims and assess the actual risk posed by the current configuration. Fourth, if noncompliance is confirmed, develop a remediation plan that addresses the root cause and brings the system into compliance, prioritizing minimal disruption to operations. Document all steps, findings, and decisions meticulously. If the audit is deemed incorrect, provide clear, evidence-based justification. This methodical approach ensures that security decisions are aligned with both operational needs and regulatory obligations, fostering a culture of compliance and robust security. Question 9. Consider a scenario where Cisco FireAMP endpoints on a network detect a suspicious process exhibiting characteristics of a zero-day exploit. The Security Operations Center, SOC, team receives an alert indicating potential command and control, C2 communication. The primary goal is to quickly neutralize the threat while ensuring that the incident response is thorough and defensible. Which of the following actions best aligns with professional cybersecurity incident response, best practices, and regulatory expectations for a U.S.-based organization? Option A. Promptly block the identified C2 IP address at the firewall and instruct the endpoint to terminate the suspicious process, assuming the threat is contained once the communication is severed. Option B. Continue monitoring the network for further suspicious activity, but refrain from isolating the endpoint to avoid disrupting business operations until a definitive confirmation of a breach is established. Option C. Immediately isolate the affected endpoint from the network, preserve its state for forensic analysis, and initiate a detailed investigation to understand the exploit's nature and impact before proceeding with further remediation actions. Option D. Initiate a full system wipe and reimaging of the affected endpoint to ensure complete removal of any potential malware without performing a forensic image first. The correct answer is C. Immediately isolate the affected endpoint from the network, preserve its state for forensic analysis, and initiate a detailed investigation to understand the exploit's nature and impact before proceeding with further remediation actions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid threat response and the need for thorough, documented investigation, especially within a regulated environment. The organization's reliance on Sourcefire FireAMP endpoints for security necessitates a response that is not only effective, but also compliant with established security policies and potentially industry-specific regulations. Though for this exam, we focus on general best practices and implied compliance with internal policies and U.S. federal guidelines for network security. Careful judgment is required to balance the urgency of a potential breach with the integrity of forensic data and the need for clear communication. Correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, evidence-based response. Isolating the affected endpoint and initiating a detailed forensic analysis ensures that the nature and scope of the threat are accurately understood. This methodical process is crucial for effective remediation, preventing recurrence, and fulfilling any potential incident reporting obligations. It aligns with the principles of due diligence in cybersecurity, ensuring that actions taken are informed and defensible. Furthermore, maintaining clear communication with stakeholders, including management and potentially legal counsel, is vital for transparency and coordinated decision-making. An incorrect approach that immediately wipes the affected endpoint without proper forensic imaging would fail to preserve critical evidence. This could hinder the investigation, prevent the identification of the root cause, and make it impossible to understand the full impact of the incident. Ethically and professionally, this is unacceptable as it compromises the integrity of the security posture and potentially violates internal policies requiring incident investigation. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on blocking the identified malicious IP address without understanding the endpoint compromise, risks leaving the network vulnerable to other attack vectors or advanced persistent threats that may not rely on that specific IP. This reactive, incomplete measure fails to address the underlying breach and could lead to a false sense of security. Third incorrect approach, delaying notification to management until a complete resolution is achieved, can lead to significant communication breakdowns and a lack of timely strategic decision-making, potentially exacerbating the impact of the incident and failing to meet professional standards of stakeholder engagement. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with immediate containment and assessment, followed by detailed investigation and analysis. This framework emphasizes evidence preservation, adherence to established incident response plans, and clear, timely communication with all relevant parties. The goal is to move from reactive containment to proactive understanding and remediation, ensuring both immediate security and long-term resilience. Question 10. The investigation demonstrates that a critical alert from Sourcefire FireAMP endpoints indicates a potential advanced persistent threat apt, targeting sensitive customer data. The alert suggests unauthorized access and data exfiltration attempts. Given the organization operates within the United States and handles personally identifiable information, PI, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action to ensure regulatory compliance and minimize organizational risk? Option A. Immediately shut down all network access for all endpoints to prevent any further data loss, and then begin a broad system scan for malware. Option B. Publicly announce a potential data breach to inform customers and stakeholders of the situation, and then investigate the alert. Option C. Initiate a full forensic investigation of affected endpoints, isolate compromised systems to prevent further exfiltration, and immediately begin documenting the incident for potential regulatory reporting. Option D. Ignore the alert as it might be a false positive, and wait for further confirmation from less sophisticated security tools. The correct answer is C. Initiate a full forensic investigation of affected endpoints, isolate compromised systems to prevent further exfiltration, and immediately begin documenting the incident for potential regulatory reporting. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a critical need for robust endpoint security and incident response capabilities, particularly in the context of evolving cyber threats. Challenge lies in balancing effective threat detection and mitigation with the operational needs and privacy concerns of end users, all while adhering to relevant regulatory frameworks. In this scenario, the primary regulatory framework to consider is U.S. federal law, specifically concerning data breach notification and the protection of sensitive information. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based response that prioritizes containment, eradication, and recovery, while also ensuring compliance with legal and ethical obligations. This includes thorough forensic analysis to understand the scope and impact of the compromise, prompt notification to affected parties as mandated by regulations like HIPAA, if applicable to the organization sector, or state-level data breach laws, and the implementation of enhanced security measures to prevent recurrence. The professional best practice here is to act with due diligence, transparency, and a commitment to minimizing harm to individuals and the organization. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the alert without adequate investigation, potentially leading to a prolonged compromise and greater damage. This failure to act promptly and thoroughly violates the principle of reasonable security measures expected under U.S. law and could result in significant legal and reputational consequences. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately shut down all affected systems without proper forensic imaging and analysis. While containment is important, destroying evidence before it can be properly collected can hinder the investigation, impede regulatory compliance, and prevent the identification of the root cause, which is a failure in professional incident response methodology. Finally, an approach that prioritizes immediate public disclosure without a clear understanding of the facts or a coordinated communication strategy could lead to panic, misinformation, and further security risks, demonstrating a lack of responsible incident management and potentially violating data protection principles. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the incident's potential impact, followed by a rapid assessment of the threat, using available security tools like FireAMP. This assessment should guide the prioritization of response actions, ensuring that containment and evidence preservation are balanced. Throughout the process, adherence to established incident response plans and relevant U.S. regulatory requirements for data protection and breach notification is paramount. Question 11. Upon reviewing the deployment plan for Cisco FireAMP endpoints within a U.S.-based financial services organization, the security team is tasked with ensuring the solution not only provides robust threat detection, but also adheres to relevant U.S. financial regulations. Considering the organization's handling of sensitive customer financial data, which of the following approaches best aligns with both security best practices and regulatory compliance requirements for this specific jurisdiction? Option A. Deploy FireAMP with its default configuration settings, assuming that the vendor's out-of-the-box settings are sufficient to meet all applicable U.S. financial regulations and provide adequate security. Option B. Focus solely on the technical capabilities of FireAMP to detect and block advanced malware, deferring any specific regulatory compliance considerations to a separate audit team after the initial deployment is complete. Option C. Conduct a detailed analysis of applicable U.S. financial regulations, e.g., GLBA SOX, to identify specific requirements related to endpoint security, data logging, and incident response, and then tailor FireAMP's configuration to meet these identified mandates, prioritizing granular logging of activities involving sensitive financial data and ensuring audit trail integrity. Option D. Configure FireAMP with the most aggressive threat detection policies and enable all available logging features to capture the maximum amount of endpoint data, regardless of immediate operational impact or specific regulatory mandates. Correct answer is D. Configure FireAMP with the most aggressive threat detection policies and enable all available logging features to capture the maximum amount of endpoint data, regardless of immediate operational impact or specific regulatory mandates. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity where a security team must balance the need for comprehensive threat detection and response with the operational realities of a business. The challenge lies in ensuring that the chosen endpoint security solution, specifically FireAMP, is configured to meet the organization's security posture, while also adhering to the specific regulatory requirements of the United States, as implied by the exam's focus on U.S.-based regulations. The pressure to deploy quickly, coupled with the need for granular control over endpoint activity, necessitates a deep understanding of both the technology and the legal/compliance landscape. Misinterpreting or overlooking specific regulatory mandates can lead to significant legal repercussions, financial penalties, and reputational damage. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of the organization's specific regulatory obligations under U.S. law, such as those mandated by HIPAA for healthcare data, PCI DSS for payment card information, or SOX for financial reporting, and then configuring FireAMP to meet these requirements. This includes understanding how FireAMP's endpoint telemetry, threat intelligence, and response capabilities can be leveraged to demonstrate compliance. For instance, if the organization handles protected health information, the configuration must ensure that FireAMP can detect and alert on anomalous activities that might indicate a breach of PHI, and that logs are retained and accessible as per HIPAA requirements. This proactive, compliance-driven configuration is best professional practice because it directly addresses legal obligations, minimizes risk, and ensures the security solution serves a dual purpose of protection and compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to prioritize solely on the most aggressive threat detection settings without considering the potential impact on business operations or specific regulatory mandates. This could lead to excessive false positives, disrupting legitimate business processes, and potentially failing to meet specific logging or data handling requirements stipulated by U.S. regulations. Another incorrect approach is to deploy FireAMP with default settings, assuming they are sufficient for compliance. Default configurations are rarely optimized for specific regulatory environments and may lack the necessary controls or logging to satisfy legal obligations, leading to non-compliance. Finally, focusing only on the technical capabilities of FireAMP without mapping them to specific regulatory requirements is a failure. This overlooks the critical step of ensuring that the technology is used to fulfill legal duties, not just to detect threats in a vacuum. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach that integrates security and compliance from the outset. This involves 1. Identifying all applicable U.S. regulations and understanding their specific requirements related to endpoint security and data protection. 2. Mapping these requirements to the capabilities of FireAMP, such as its ability to log specific events, detect certain types of malware, or facilitate incident response. 3. Developing a configuration strategy that prioritizes compliance while also maximizing threat detection and minimizing operational impact. 4. Regularly reviewing and auditing the configuration to ensure ongoing adherence to both security best practices and regulatory mandates. This systematic process ensures that the chosen security solution effectively protects the organization and meets its legal obligations. Question 12. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a comprehensive endpoint security solution like Cisco FireAMP offers significant advantages in threat detection and prevention. Given the organization's limited IT resources and the need to minimize disruption to end users, which deployment strategy best balances security effectiveness with operational feasibility and regulatory compliance? Option A. Deployment of FireAMP exclusively on endpoints that have recently experienced a security incident to address immediate threats. Option B. An immediate organization-wide Big Bang deployment to ensure all endpoints are protected simultaneously, regardless of potential initial disruptions. Option C. A deployment focused solely on the technical capabilities of FireAMP, without initial consideration for integration with existing security tools or user training. Option D. A phased deployment, beginning with a pilot group of critical users and systems, followed by a gradual rollout to the rest of the organization, allowing for iterative refinement of policies and training. Correct answer is D. A phased deployment, beginning with a pilot group of critical users and systems, followed by a gradual rollout to the rest of the organization, allowing for iterative refinement of policies and training. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity, balancing the need for robust security controls with operational efficiency and resource constraints. Implementing advanced endpoint security solutions like FireAMP, while highly effective, can introduce complexities in management, potential performance impacts on endpoints, and require specialized training for security personnel. The organization faces pressure to demonstrate value for its investment, especially when faced with budget reviews or the need to justify additional resources. This requires a strategic approach that aligns security objectives with business goals and regulatory compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased deployment strategy, prioritizing critical assets and high-risk user groups. This aligns with best practices for managing change within an organization and minimizes disruption. By starting with a pilot group, the organization can validate the effectiveness of FireAMP, identify and address any performance issues, and refine deployment and management processes before a full rollout. This approach also allows for targeted training of key personnel, ensuring they are proficient in utilizing the solution's capabilities. From a regulatory perspective, this demonstrates due diligence in implementing security controls, ensuring that sensitive data and critical systems are protected first, which is often a requirement in data protection regulations. It also allows for a more controlled and auditable implementation, which is crucial for compliance reporting. Incorrect approaches analysis. A big bang deployment without prior testing or a phased approach is professionally unacceptable because it significantly increases the risk of widespread operational disruption, user complaints, and potential security gaps if unforeseen issues arise. This approach fails to demonstrate prudent risk management and could lead to a violation of regulatory requirements that mandate the protection of data and systems without undue disruption to business operations. Implementing FireAMP only on endpoints that have already experienced a security incident is also professionally unacceptable. While it addresses immediate threats, it neglects the proactive security posture required by most regulatory frameworks. This reactive approach leaves other critical assets vulnerable and fails to meet the standard of comprehensive security coverage expected for compliance. It also represents a failure to implement a risk-based security strategy, which is a cornerstone of modern cybersecurity governance. Focusing solely on the technical features of FireAMP without considering integration with existing security infrastructure and incident response workflows is professionally unsound. This siloed approach can lead to alert fatigue, inefficient incident handling, and a failure to leverage the full potential of the security investment. It also undermines the holistic security strategy necessary to meet regulatory obligations for integrated security management and incident response. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves identifying critical assets, understanding potential threats and vulnerabilities, and evaluating the impact of security incidents. When implementing new security technologies, a phased approach, starting with pilot programs and gradually expanding, is crucial for managing risk and ensuring successful adoption. This approach allows for continuous assessment and adaptation, ensuring that security controls are effective and aligned with business objectives and regulatory requirements. Professionals must also consider the total cost of ownership, including implementation, training, and ongoing management, to justify the investment and demonstrate value. Question 13. Examination of the data shows a high-severity alert from Cisco FireAMP indicating potential malware activity on a critical server within the financial services network. The alert details include a suspicious process execution and network communication to an unknown external IP address. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the security analyst? Option A. Escalate the alert to the incident response team for immediate review and guidance without taking any immediate action on the server. Option B. Initiate a full network scan of all connected devices to identify the scope of the potential infection. Option C. Block the external IP address identified in the alert at the firewall and monitor the server's activity for a short period. Option D. Immediately isolate the affected server from the network to prevent further spread and begin detailed forensic analysis. The correct answer is B. Initiate a full network scan of all connected devices to identify the scope of the potential infection. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security operations, where a critical security alert from the FireAMP endpoint solution requires immediate attention. The professional must balance the urgency of a potential security incident with the need for accurate threat assessment and adherence to established incident response protocols. Misinterpreting the alert or acting prematurely can lead to unnecessary disruption, resource misallocation, or, conversely, a failure to contain a genuine threat. The challenge lies in discerning the true nature and severity of the alert within the context of the organization's security posture and regulatory obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based response. This begins with validating the alert by correlating it with other security telemetry and contextual information. Understanding the specific threat indicators, the affected endpoint's role, and the potential impact is crucial. Following established incident response playbooks, which are often mandated by regulatory frameworks like those governing data protection and network security in the U.S. e.g. NIST guidelines, specific industry regulations like HIPAA or PCI DSS, if applicable to the organization's sector, ensures a consistent, documented, and effective response. This approach prioritizes containment, eradication, and recovery while maintaining audit trails for compliance and post-incident analysis. It aligns with the principle of due diligence in cybersecurity, ensuring that actions taken are proportionate to the assessed risk and are defensible from a regulatory standpoint. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately isolate all endpoints exhibiting similar characteristics without further investigation. This can lead to significant operational disruption and business impact, potentially violating service-level agreements or even regulatory requirements related to business continuity. Ethically, it represents an overreaction that could be damaging without sufficient justification. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the alert as a false positive without thorough validation. This carries a severe regulatory risk, as a failure to investigate a credible threat could result in a data breach or other security incident, leading to significant fines and reputational damage under U.S. data privacy laws. It also represents a failure of professional duty to protect the network. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on automated remediation without human oversight. While automation is valuable, critical alerts require human judgment to assess context, potential collateral damage, and the appropriateness of the automated action, especially when regulatory compliance or sensitive data is involved. This can lead to unintended consequences and a lack of accountability. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such alerts should employ a structured decision-making framework. This framework typically involves 1. Alert triage and validation, confirming the alert's legitimacy and severity using multiple data sources. 2. Contextualization, understanding the affected system's data and potential business impact. 3. Incident response plan activation, following predefined playbooks tailored to the alert type and severity. 4. Containment and eradication, implementing measures to stop the threat's spread and remove it. 5. Recovery and post-incident analysis, restoring systems and learning from the incident to improve defenses. This process ensures that actions are deliberate, effective, and compliant with relevant U.S. cybersecurity regulations and best practices. Question 14. Performance analysis shows a critical new threat requiring immediate deployment of Cisco FireAMP endpoints across the organization's network to enhance endpoint security. Given the potential for widespread impact, what is the most prudent and professionally responsible approach to ensure both effective threat mitigation and operational stability? Option A. Deploy FireAMP endpoints to a pilot group of non-critical endpoints first to validate functionality and impact before a full rollout. Option B. Deploy FireAMP endpoints only to critical servers and address any issues on other endpoints as they arise. Option C. Prioritize the deployment of FireAMP endpoints based solely on their threat detection capabilities, without extensive pre-deployment testing of integration. Option D. Immediately deploy FireAMP endpoints to all network segments simultaneously to ensure comprehensive coverage against the critical threat. The correct answer is A. Deploy FireAMP endpoints to a pilot group of non-critical endpoints first to validate functionality and impact before a full rollout. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge stemming from the inherent tension between maintaining robust network security and ensuring operational continuity. The need to rapidly deploy a security solution like FireAMP endpoints, especially in response to a detected threat, requires swift decision-making. However, the potential for unintended consequences, such as service disruption or compatibility issues with existing critical systems, necessitates a balanced approach. The challenge lies in making an informed decision that prioritizes security without unduly jeopardizing business operations, all while adhering to relevant regulatory frameworks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a phased deployment strategy, beginning with a pilot group of non-critical endpoints. This aligns with best professional practices for implementing new security technologies. It allows for thorough testing and validation of FireAMP's efficacy and stability in a controlled environment before a full-scale rollout. This methodology minimizes the risk of widespread disruption. From a regulatory perspective, particularly within a U.S. context governed by frameworks like NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, guidelines for cybersecurity, this approach supports the principle of risk management. NIST SB 800-53, for instance, advocates for testing and evaluation before full implementation to ensure security controls do not adversely affect organizational operations. This measured approach demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to responsible security deployment, which is often a requirement for compliance with data protection regulations that mandate reasonable security measures. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing FireAMP endpoints across all network segments simultaneously without prior testing is a regulatory and ethical failure. This approach disregards the principle of risk management and could lead to significant operational disruptions, potentially violating service-level agreements or even regulatory mandates that require the continuous availability of critical systems. For example, if a financial institution were to deploy such a solution without testing, and it caused an outage during trading hours, it could face severe penalties under regulations like the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA, which mandates the protection of customer financial information and implies the need for operational resilience. Deploying FireAMP endpoints only on critical servers and then addressing issues as they arise is also professionally unsound and carries significant regulatory risk. This reactive strategy prioritizes immediate security coverage on high-value targets, but fails to account for the potential cascading effects of an untested solution on those very systems. It also neglects the broader attack surface that non-critical endpoints represent. Such an approach could lead to a breach on a less protected system that then compromises critical infrastructure, a scenario that would be viewed as a failure to implement adequate security controls under regulations like HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. If patient data were involved, focusing solely on the threat detection capabilities of FireAMP without considering its integration and potential impact on existing network infrastructure is another flawed approach. Security solutions must be evaluated not just for their primary function, but also for their interoperability and resource utilization. A failure to consider integration can lead to performance degradation or conflicts, indirectly weakening the overall security posture and potentially violating compliance requirements that mandate a holistic and integrated security strategy. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes risk assessment and mitigation. This involves understanding the potential impact of a security solution on both security posture and operational continuity. A phased approach, starting with a pilot, is a cornerstone of this framework. It allows for iterative validation and adjustment, ensuring that security objectives are met without compromising business functions. This process should be documented, and any deviations from the plan should be justified and approved through a formal change management process, further reinforcing accountability and adherence to best practices and regulatory expectations. Question 15. The evaluation methodology shows that during a critical security incident, a network administrator has identified a potential malware outbreak affecting multiple endpoints. The administrator must decide on the immediate course of action to contain the threat while adhering to the organization's security policies and relevant regulatory guidelines. Which of the following approaches best represents a professional and compliant response? Option A. Manually remove suspicious files from a few endpoints that appear to be the source of the infection, hoping to contain the spread without alerting other systems or users. Option B. Delay any containment actions until a comprehensive report on the malware's origin and full impact can be generated by the security team to ensure no legitimate traffic is interrupted. Option C. Halt all network traffic to and from the affected segment to prevent further spread, even if it means significant disruption to critical business operations, and then begin a deep forensic investigation. Option D. Immediately isolate all affected endpoints from the network and initiate a full system scan on each, while simultaneously documenting all actions taken and preparing for a detailed post-incident analysis. Correct answer is D. Immediately isolate all affected endpoints from the network and initiate a full system scan on each, while simultaneously documenting all actions taken and preparing for a detailed post-incident analysis. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security operations, balancing immediate threat mitigation with long-term policy adherence and resource allocation. The pressure to quickly contain a potential breach, coupled with the need to justify the actions taken to management and potentially auditors, creates a complex decision-making environment. The professional challenge lies in selecting an incident response strategy that is both effective in neutralizing the threat and compliant with established security policies and regulatory frameworks relevant to the exam's jurisdiction. The need for rapid response can sometimes lead to hasty decisions that bypass proper authorization or documentation, which can have significant repercussions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a structured incident response process that aligns with established security policies and regulatory requirements. This involves immediate containment and eradication actions, followed by thorough investigation and documentation. By adhering to a predefined incident response plan, the security team ensures that actions are consistent, repeatable, and defensible. This approach is best professional practice because it demonstrates due diligence, accountability, and a commitment to maintaining a secure and compliant network environment. It also facilitates post-incident analysis, enabling lessons learned to improve future responses and strengthen overall security posture, which is crucial for meeting regulatory obligations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately escalating the incident to a full network lockdown without sufficient initial analysis. This can lead to unnecessary business disruption, impacting critical operations and potentially violating service-level agreements or compliance mandates that require continuous availability. It bypasses the principle of proportionate response, which is often implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory frameworks that emphasize risk-based decision-making. Another incorrect approach is to delay significant containment actions in favor of extensive, time-consuming forensic analysis before any mitigation is attempted. While forensic analysis is vital, delaying containment can allow a threat to propagate, causing greater damage and increasing the difficulty of eradication. This failure to act decisively in the initial stages of an incident can be seen as a dereliction of duty and a violation of the principle of timely threat mitigation, which is a cornerstone of most cybersecurity regulations. A third incorrect approach is to implement ad hoc, undocumented remediation steps without proper authorization or adherence to change management procedures. This creates a shadow IT environment within the security infrastructure, making it difficult to track what changes have been made, their impact, and their effectiveness. Such actions can introduce new vulnerabilities, complicate future troubleshooting, and critically, fail to meet audit and compliance requirements that mandate clear, auditable records of all security-related actions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that integrates incident response best practices with regulatory compliance. This framework typically involves 1. Preparation, having a well-defined incident response plan and necessary tools in place. 2. Identification, detecting and confirming an incident. 3. Containment, limiting the scope and impact of the incident. 4. Eradication, removing the threat. 5. Recovery, restoring systems to normal operation. 6. Lessons learned, analyzing the incident and response to improve future preparedness. Throughout this process, maintaining clear documentation and seeking appropriate authorization for significant actions are paramount to ensure regulatory adherence and professional accountability. Question 16. Analysis of a Security Operations Center, SOC, analyst reviewing alerts from Sourcefire FireAMP endpoints within a U.S.-based financial institution. The analyst observes a consistent pattern of alerts related to specific executables on multiple user workstations, all flagged as potentially suspicious but not definitively malicious. The institution is subject to strict U.S. financial regulations, requiring robust cybersecurity measures and timely incident reporting. The analyst must decide on the most appropriate course of action to manage these alerts effectively and compliantly. Option A. Investigate the alerts by correlating the suspicious executables with known threat intelligence feeds, analyzing the behavior of these executables on a sample of affected endpoints, and documenting findings to determine if further action, such as policy tuning or incident escalation, is warranted. Option B. Immediately dismiss all alerts related to these executables, assuming they are false positives due to their repetitive nature and lack of definitive malicious indicators, to reduce alert fatigue. Option C. Configure Sourcefire FireAMP to automatically block all executables exhibiting these specific characteristics without further human review, prioritizing operational efficiency over detailed analysis. Option D. Escalate all alerts related to these executables to the incident response team for immediate investigation and containment, regardless of the level of certainty about their maliciousness, to ensure no potential threat is overlooked. Correct answer is A. Investigate the alerts by correlating the suspicious executables with known threat intelligence feeds, analyzing the behavior of these executables on a sample of affected endpoints, and documenting findings to determine if further action, such as policy tuning or incident escalation, is warranted. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security, balancing the need for robust threat detection and response with the operational realities of a dynamic network environment. The challenge lies in accurately identifying and prioritizing alerts generated by Sourcefire FireAMP endpoints, especially when dealing with a high volume of potentially false positives. Misinterpreting or mishandling these alerts can lead to significant security gaps, wasted resources, or unnecessary disruption to business operations. A professional must possess a deep understanding of the threat landscape, the capabilities of the security solution, and the organization's risk tolerance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based method for alert triage and investigation. This begins with understanding the context of the alert, including the endpoint involved, the nature of the detected activity, and its potential impact. Leveraging threat intelligence, both internal and external, is crucial for validating the severity and legitimacy of an alert. Establishing clear escalation procedures and communication channels ensures that critical incidents are addressed promptly and effectively by the appropriate personnel. This methodical approach aligns with best practices for incident response and security operations, aiming to minimize dwell time of threats and reduce the attack surface. It also implicitly supports regulatory compliance by demonstrating a commitment to proactive security monitoring and timely remediation of identified risks. Incorrect approaches analysis. Ignoring alerts based solely on their frequency or perceived low impact is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to uphold the organization's responsibility to protect its assets and data. It can lead to missed critical threats, violating compliance mandates that require diligent monitoring and response. Blindly escalating every alert without initial validation is also professionally unacceptable. This creates alert fatigue, overwhelms the security team, and diverts resources from genuine threats. It represents an inefficient use of security tools and personnel, potentially leading to missed critical incidents due to the sheer volume of noise. Ethically, it fails to demonstrate responsible stewardship of organizational resources. Relying solely on automated remediation without human oversight, especially for high-severity alerts, can be dangerous. While automation is valuable, it can lead to unintended consequences, such as disrupting critical business processes or incorrectly isolating legitimate user activity. This approach can violate operational continuity requirements and demonstrate a lack of nuanced judgment, which is essential for effective security management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves 1. Understanding the organization's threat model and risk appetite. 2. Establishing clear alert triage criteria based on potential impact and likelihood. 3. Utilizing threat intelligence to enrich alert data and inform prioritization. 4. Implementing a layered defense strategy where endpoint alerts are correlated with other security telemetry. 5. Defining and practicing incident response playbooks for various alert types. 6. Continuously reviewing and refining the alert tuning and response processes based on lessons learned and evolving threats. This structured approach ensures that security resources are focused on the most critical threats, thereby enhancing the overall security posture and demonstrating a commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical responsibility. Question 17. The control framework reveals a need to enhance endpoint threat detection and response capabilities across the organization's network. Management has approved the deployment of Cisco FireAMP endpoints, considering the potential impact on network performance and the need for effective policy implementation. Which of the following approaches best balances security enhancement with operational stability? Option A. Immediately deploy FireAMP to all endpoints across the entire network to ensure immediate and comprehensive protection against all potential threats. Option B. Conduct a pilot deployment of FireAMP on a representative segment of endpoints to validate performance and policy effectiveness before a full-scale rollout. Option C. Deploy FireAMP exclusively on critical servers, as they represent the most sensitive assets, and defer endpoint deployment to a later phase. Option D. Prioritize the configuration of the most advanced threat intelligence feeds and detection rules within FireAMP, assuming this will automatically optimize performance and security. The correct answer is B. Conduct a pilot deployment of FireAMP on a representative segment of endpoints to validate performance and policy effectiveness before a full-scale rollout. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security, balancing the need for granular visibility and control with the potential for performance degradation and the complexity of managing advanced endpoint security solutions like FireAMP. The challenge lies in making a decision that is technically sound, cost-effective, and compliant with the organization's security posture and any applicable regulatory requirements, without compromising essential business operations. The pressure to quickly address a perceived threat, coupled with limited resources or expertise, can lead to hasty and potentially detrimental decisions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a phased, risk-based deployment and validation strategy. This aligns with best practices in cybersecurity and IT project management, emphasizing due diligence and minimizing disruption. By starting with a pilot group, the organization can assess the actual impact of FireAMP on network performance and endpoint functionality in a controlled environment. This allows for the identification and remediation of any issues before a full-scale rollout. Furthermore, this approach facilitates the validation of security policies and detection rules, ensuring they are effective and appropriately tuned. This methodical process is crucial for demonstrating due diligence and adherence to principles of responsible security implementation, which are often implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory frameworks that mandate risk assessment and mitigation. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing FireAMP across the entire network without prior testing is a high-risk strategy. This approach disregards the potential for unforeseen compatibility issues, performance bottlenecks, or unintended consequences that could disrupt critical business functions. Such a failure to adequately assess risk and impact could be seen as a violation of due diligence requirements mandated by many security frameworks, potentially leading to non-compliance if operational disruptions cause a breach of service-level agreements or data integrity. Deploying FireAMP only on critical servers, while ignoring endpoints, could leave significant gaps in the overall security posture. While critical servers are important, modern threats often target endpoints to gain initial access or move laterally. This selective deployment fails to provide comprehensive protection and may not meet the requirements of regulations that mandate protection of all network assets. It represents a failure to implement a holistic security strategy, focusing solely on the most advanced threat detection features of FireAMP without considering the organization's specific threat landscape and resource capabilities is also problematic. This can lead to alert fatigue, misconfiguration, and an inability to effectively manage the solution, potentially rendering it ineffective or even counterproductive. It demonstrates a lack of strategic planning and a failure to align security investments with actual needs and operational realities, which can be a compliance concern if it leads to a failure to adequately protect sensitive data. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that involves 1. Understanding the problem and its potential impact. 2. Identifying and evaluating available solutions, considering technical feasibility, cost, and operational impact. 3. Assessing risks associated with each solution, including potential security vulnerabilities and business disruptions. 4. consulting relevant policies, procedures, and regulatory requirements. 5. Developing a phased implementation and validation plan for chosen solutions. 6. Documenting the decision-making process and rationale. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with organizational objectives and compliance obligations. Question 18. Benchmark analysis indicates that a critical network segment has experienced a suspected malware infection, leading to service degradation. The immediate pressure is to restore full functionality as quickly as possible. Which of the following approaches best aligns with securing Cisco networks using Sourcefire FireAMP endpoints and adhering to U.S. regulatory frameworks for incident response and impact assessment? Option A. Immediately deploy automated remediation scripts to isolate and clean infected endpoints, then restore services, deferring a detailed impact assessment until after full operational recovery. Option B. Prioritize restoring network services to critical business functions first, then address the security incident by applying patches to the affected systems as a secondary task. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive impact assessment to identify all affected systems, data, and potential regulatory implications before implementing any remediation or restoring services. Option D. Rely solely on the default threat intelligence feeds within Sourcefire FireAMP to identify and quarantine the malware, then proceed with service restoration without further investigation. The correct answer is A. Immediately deploy automated remediation scripts to isolate and clean infected endpoints, then restore services, deferring a detailed impact assessment until after full operational recovery. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the need to balance the immediate operational requirements of a critical network infrastructure with the long-term security posture mandated by regulatory frameworks. The pressure to restore service quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise thorough impact assessment, potentially introducing new vulnerabilities or failing to address the root cause of the incident. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the remediation process not only resolves the immediate issue, but also strengthens the overall security of the network in compliance with relevant regulations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that meticulously documents the scope of the compromise, identifies all affected systems and data, and evaluates the potential business and regulatory consequences. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and risk management expected under U.S. cybersecurity regulations, such as those outlined by NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, which are often referenced in U.S.-based cybersecurity certifications. A thorough assessment ensures that remediation efforts are targeted, effective, and do not inadvertently create new security gaps. It also provides the necessary documentation for regulatory reporting and future incident response planning, demonstrating a commitment to maintaining a secure environment. Incorrect approach is analysis. Focusing solely on the immediate threat without a broader impact assessment is a regulatory and ethical failure. This approach risks overlooking critical vulnerabilities or data exfiltration that could have significant legal and financial repercussions, violating the spirit of regulations that mandate comprehensive data protection and incident response. Prioritizing speed of restoration over thoroughness can lead to a recurrence of the incident or the introduction of new, undetected threats, demonstrating a lack of professional responsibility in safeguarding the network and its data. Implementing a fix without understanding the full extent of the compromise is also a failure. This can result in an incomplete remediation, leaving the network susceptible to further attacks or failing to meet compliance requirements for incident handling and breach notification. It suggests a reactive rather than a proactive security posture, which is contrary to best practices and regulatory expectations for maintaining a secure network. Relying on automated remediation tools without human oversight and a subsequent impact assessment is another significant failure. While automation is valuable, it should augment, not replace, human judgment and analysis. Over-reliance on automation without understanding the context of the incident can lead to unintended consequences, such as disabling critical services or failing to address the underlying cause of the vulnerability. This demonstrates a lack of professional diligence and can result in non-compliance with regulations that require a reasoned and documented approach to security incidents. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach security incidents with a structured methodology that begins with containment and eradication, but critically includes a thorough impact assessment before full restoration. This assessment should leverage available tools, including those provided by Sourcefire FireAMP, to gather intelligence on the incident's scope and nature. The findings should then be analyzed against business impact and regulatory requirements. This systematic approach ensures that remediation is not only effective, but also compliant and contributes to a stronger overall security posture. Documenting each step of the process, from initial detection to final remediation and post-incident review, is crucial for accountability and continuous improvement. Question 19. Research into the most effective method for integrating new endpoint security policies, specifically for Cisco FireAMP, into an existing network infrastructure, considering the potential for operational disruption and the need for a controlled rollout. Option A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to identify potential conflicts and dependencies before deploying FireAMP policies broadly, followed by a phased rollout. Option B. Rely solely on the default FireAMP policy settings provided by the vendor without any further customization or testing. Option C. Implement FireAMP policies only on a small subset of non-critical endpoints to gather initial data, ignoring potential impacts on broader network segments. Option D. Immediately deploy all recommended FireAMP policies across the entire network to ensure maximum protection against emerging threats. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to identify potential conflicts and dependencies before deploying FireAMP policies broadly, followed by a phased rollout. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid threat response and the need for thorough impact assessment before implementing broad security changes. Organizations often face pressure to immediately contain perceived threats, but a hasty response without understanding the potential downstream effects on business operations, user access, or critical systems can lead to more significant disruptions than the initial threat itself. The challenge lies in balancing urgency with due diligence, ensuring that security actions are both effective against threats and minimally disruptive to legitimate business function. This requires a nuanced understanding of the organization's critical assets and dependencies. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased implementation strategy that prioritizes understanding the potential impact of security policy changes on the network and its users. This aligns with best practices in IT security and risk management, which emphasize a controlled and informed deployment of security measures. By first conducting a thorough impact assessment, security professionals can identify potential conflicts, unintended consequences, and necessary adjustments before widespread deployment. This proactive step ensures that the security solution, in this case, FireAMP endpoint policies, is tailored to the specific environment, minimizing false positives, operational disruptions, and ensuring compliance with any relevant internal or external operational guidelines. This approach fosters trust and reduces the likelihood of security measures hindering, rather than helping. Business continuity. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing broad, untested FireAMP policies without an impact assessment is professionally unacceptable because it disregards fundamental risk management principles. This approach risks causing widespread service outages, blocking legitimate user access to critical applications, and generating a significant volume of support tickets, all of which can severely disrupt business operations. Ethically, it fails to protect the organization's operational integrity and can lead to a loss of user confidence. Deploying FireAMP policies solely based on vendor recommendations without environmental validation is also professionally unsound. While vendor guidance is valuable, it cannot account for the unique configurations, applications, and user behaviors within a specific organization. This can lead to misconfigurations, false positives, and an inability to effectively detect or block actual threats relevant to the organization's specific threat landscape. This approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to adapt security measures to the organization's context, focusing exclusively on blocking all potentially suspicious activities identified by FireAMP without understanding the context or potential impact is another professionally flawed strategy. This block everything mentality, while seemingly secure, often cripples productivity and can inadvertently block essential business processes. It fails to differentiate between malicious activity and legitimate, albeit unusual, user or application behavior, leading to operational paralysis and a negative user experience. This approach prioritizes a simplistic view of security over a balanced and effective security posture. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured approach to implementing new security technologies like FireAMP. This involves 1. Understanding the threat landscape and organizational risk appetite. 2. Performing a comprehensive impact assessment of proposed policy changes, including pilot testing in a controlled environment. 3. Phased deployment, starting with less critical systems or in a monitoring-only mode. 4. Continuous monitoring and refinement of policies, based on observed behavior and threat intelligence. 5. Clear communication with stakeholders regarding changes and their rationale. This methodical process ensures that security measures are effective, efficient, and aligned with business objectives. Question 20. Operational review demonstrates that Cisco FireAMP has detected a suspicious process exhibiting anomalous behavior on a critical server. The alert indicates a potential command and control communication attempt originating from an external IP address. Given the potential for a sophisticated threat, what is the most appropriate immediate next step to ensure a balanced and effective response? Option A. Immediately block all network traffic originating from the identified external IP address across the entire network to prevent further communication. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive impact assessment to determine the scope of the compromise, affected data, and critical business functions before enacting broad containment measures. Option C. Isolate only the specific endpoint that triggered the FireAMP alert and await further instructions. Option D. Escalate the incident to senior management for an immediate decision on how to proceed with containment. The correct answer is B. Initiate a comprehensive impact assessment to determine the scope of the compromise, affected data, and critical business functions before enacting broad containment measures. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for rapid threat response with the imperative to understand the full scope and potential impact of an incident. The pressure to quickly contain a detected threat, especially one flagged by a sophisticated tool like FireAMP, can lead to hasty decisions. However, without a thorough impact assessment, an organization risks overreacting, causing unnecessary disruption, or, conversely, underreacting and failing to address the root cause or full extent of the compromise. The professional challenge lies in synthesizing technical indicators with business context to make informed, risk-based decisions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a structured impact assessment before enacting broad containment measures. This aligns with best practices in incident response and regulatory expectations for due diligence. By first understanding what systems are affected, what data might be compromised, and what business functions are at risk, security teams can tailor their response. This ensures that containment actions are proportionate to the actual threat and minimize collateral damage to legitimate operations. This methodical approach is crucial for demonstrating a commitment to data protection and operational continuity, which are often implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory frameworks governing data security and privacy. It allows for a more precise and effective remediation, reducing the likelihood of repeat incidents and demonstrating responsible stewardship of organizational assets. Correct approaches analysis. Implementing immediate network-wide blocking of all traffic from the identified source IP address without further analysis is a regulatory and ethical failure. This approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence in understanding the scope of the threat. It could lead to the blocking of legitimate business traffic, causing significant operational disruption and potential financial loss, which could be viewed as a failure to maintain business continuity. Ethically, it prioritizes a potentially overzealous technical reaction over a considered assessment of business impact. Isolating only the single endpoint that triggered the FireAMP alert without investigating potential lateral movement or other compromised systems is also a failure. This approach is insufficient because advanced threats often spread beyond the initial point of detection. By not assessing the broader impact, the organization risks leaving other systems vulnerable and allowing the threat to persist undetected. This can lead to a more severe breach later, violating the duty to protect data and systems comprehensively. Escalating the incident to senior management for a decision on containment without any preliminary impact assessment is inefficient and potentially delays critical response actions. While executive buy-in is important, presenting an issue without a clear understanding of its potential consequences hinders effective decision-making. This can be seen as a failure in professional responsibility to provide actionable intelligence, potentially leading to delayed or inappropriate responses that could have regulatory implications if data is compromised due to inaction. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a phased incident response methodology that begins with detection and initial analysis, followed by a thorough impact assessment. This assessment should involve identifying affected assets, data types, and business processes. Based on this understanding, a risk-based containment and eradication strategy can be developed. Communication with relevant stakeholders, including management and potentially legal or compliance teams, should be informed by the impact assessment. This structured approach ensures that responses are effective, proportionate, and compliant with organizational policies and relevant regulations.